Greetings. So, another way to create a character is to use an historical figure. Now, let me be very, very clear here. I am not talking about fictional historical figures. I don't want you to take anyone from Lord of the Rings or from the Marvel universe, etc., etc. Because if you do, I promise you, you are just stealing another artist's work, and that is bullshit. You're just making a copy of a copy, and your audience will know it, and they will not fall in love with your character or find it interesting. They'll be able to smell the lie, you know what I mean? So don't even go there. Don't think you can get away with it. Your audience, and remember, you are also somebody's audience. You want to see something new, unique, something new, but also something that you recognize deep down inside your heart. So don't take from another artist's creation. It's so boring. No, 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 no. Not allowed. Because we have millions of historical characters, people who actually lived, who are available to us. Think of it. All the people that ever lived, we only know of a tiny percent of them, those that made their mark on the world. And sorry, quite frankly, they are mostly men. And history is a very strange thing. For example, in Norway, you have historically Max Manus, the great freedom fighter in the Second World War, and Vidkun Quisling, the great traitor. One fought against the Nazis, one became a Nazi. One is a hero and one is a monster. And there's another thing. As I said, you'll find way, way more men published in history than women. It's just a fact, yeah? And that's not because there have been way, way more men on the planet than women. The opposite's true, actually. It's not even that men are better than women, necessarily. It's just about the weird structures of our societies, and it's about who writes the history. And the further back you go, the less information you have. We live in the most documented age in the history of the planet. 100 years ago, you had to go to a library, mate, and the only people who made it into libraries were the famous. So the further back you go, the less information you have, and so you, the writer, in this masterclass, when it comes to historical characters, you can fill in the blanks, and this is called imagining history. Now, what you're not doing here, and I'm not encouraging you to do this, is claim your fictions as fact. I'm just asking you to imagine what it might have been like 500 years ago. So I'm currently writing a television series about King Frederick IV of Denmark and Norway. You've probably never heard of him. And it doesn't surprise me. He lived in the 1600s, and there's very, very little information available about him. He wasn't one of the interesting kings. He wasn't one of the extraordinary kings. He wasn't even one of the crazy kings. He was more like a historical afterthought. He was a bit of a crap king, you know? He was a kind of weak younger brother who ascended to the throne. You've all watched The Crown. But he is the king who sold all of the fishing rights of the poor people along the coast of Norway to wealthy merchants in the towns. And those poor people lost their freedom, and they became slaves to those rich men in the towns. That's here in Norway, because the king decided to sell the sea. But the little that's written about Frederick, it doesn't tell us very much about why he would do such a thing. Some people have said he was stupid, other people said he was kind. Apparently he was interested in art and theatre, and yet he was also ultra-religious. Some people said he listened to his people, and yet he sold off their livelihoods to wealthy merchants. He was a man of contradictions. What do we believe? Now, I decided to use King Frederick IV of Norway, the afterthought king, to tell a bigger story. A story about injustice, about how the rich take from the poor, and about how the people who are born into power often abuse that power. But I also have to show Frederick as a human being. Otherwise you, the audience, aren't going to be interested. You see, Frederick's little son died at the age of 4, and apparently it broke Frederick's heart. And he loved his wife very, very much. And he called her his sweetheart and his angel. We see that from the letters he wrote. So he wasn't just a rich, stupid, arsehole king who made the lives of the poor people in Norway miserable, although he was also a rich, stupid, arsehole king who made the lives of poor, hard-working people in Norway miserable. But he was other things as well, and that's what makes not him necessarily interesting, but his story. Now, my version of Frederick isn't one that you'll find in the history books, although, like any good true crime investigation, I've looked at all the available evidence of the history books, and I came to a conclusion. And, by the way, the reason I decided to write about King Frederick IV of Denmark and Norway was because what he did to the fishing folk on the coasts of Norway in 1728 is kind of similar to what some of the very rich men in Norway are doing today to the poor people. And there are poor people in Norway. What they're doing is they're selling things that belong to everybody, like the train lines, making them private, making a profit. So by writing about King Frederick IV, I was able to tell a story about something I feel very strong about, something that's very unfair and very unjust in 2021. It's called allegory. Allegory. Look it up, that's what Google's for. So my challenge to you, breathe, is to find an historical person, write down whatever information, facts you can find about them. You write whether they were born poor or rich. Did they become poor or rich? Because some go from being poor to rich, rich to poor. Were they a man? Were they a woman? What was their health like? What was their family life like? Are there any paintings of them? What did they look like? What did they care about? Yeah, what did your character care about? What kind of food did they eat in the age in which they lived? So what did King Frederick have for breakfast the day he said, let's take away all the fishing rights from the fishermen in Norway and sell them to some fat nissekongen in Trondheim? I realise I'm a bit obsessed about King Frederick IV, but, you know, I'm an artist. I've got nothing else in life. How did they die? And what's their legacy? How are they remembered? Are they remembered well? Or they're remembered with ill will? So I want you to get as many facts under your belt as possible. I want you to look at all those facts on the page, write them down. I mean, it doesn't have to be an essay. It might be 10 facts. That's enough to go on. And just start to let the mists clear. Trust your instincts. Know that you own this moment. This isn't school, right? So you're not getting character grades on this. You're artists. This is not school. You don't get judged in that way. And you've got nothing to lose. I just want you to let your instincts tell your version of this historical character as it appears. So maybe you want them to speak to us from the past. Perhaps they want to warn us, or teach us, or comfort us. Perhaps they are desperate to defend themselves and their character. It's up to you. But give your character a reason to speak. And then give them the words.